This video is sponsored by my favorite website creator, Squarespace, the best place to go when you want to get a domain or create a gorgeous website or an online store. So yes, you asked me to make a video on this, and I myself love talking about all this anyway, and I love hearing other people talking about their creative processes. So I'll just try to run it through with you guys, how I came up with the idea for my novel and how I wrote the first draft, which honestly took just like 7 or 8 weeks. I know, right? It sounds strange even to me myself. Of course, the editing then took a lot longer than that, but the first draft was that quickly because my writing process, actually, it starts like way before I sit down with a blank page and go like, chapter 1, once upon a time, you know? So let's start from the very beginning, and I actually remember the exact moment when I started on this book. You know, I had been writing on a thriller earlier as like a fun project together with David, but as I was writing it, I realized that, hey, I actually want to like write properly, not as a fun project anymore, but as, you know, a profession. And it was obvious at that point that I was writing in the wrong genre. So I told David to scrap the thriller and start again on something new, something that I really wanted to write, because it's the kind of thing that I myself enjoy reading. But like, how do you start on a project like that? Like a literary relationship novel with a whole other type of mood? What I did was actually, like now in hindsight, really quite clever. This was the end of the summer of 2020, and we were like still living in our old flat, and one afternoon I was like, let's just sit down on the sofa with the laptop and write a short story, see what comes out, with like no pressure at all. And it came out really easily. I didn't have a plan or anything, it just came naturally. And it was so much fun, and I could really tell sort of at once that I was quite happy with it. After that, over the next like couple of weeks, I wrote maybe 9 or 10 other short stories, or like short scenes, just for fun, to try to like find my voice in this new style. I didn't edit them at all. I just like drafted them and then read through to maybe make some small polishes. And this is actually how my novel happened. I read through these like 9 or 10 short stories, and maybe 5 of them I felt had some like music or like a heartbeat and could also be part of the same story. And some of them were really quite cringe, and I actually haven't read them since. But those 5 better stories that I just randomly penned down on lazy August afternoons for fun, they are actually quite intact as 5 of the chapters in the finished novel. And crazily, the very first story I wrote on the sofa is actually the first chapter in the novel. Can you imagine if someone had told me that, like on that afternoon when I was sitting there just seeing what would come out? Strange to think about, actually. I feel a bit weird about it even now, just talking about it, and I feel even weirder thinking about all of you who have already pre-ordered the book, because at some point you will actually read it. I think it's June 8th that it will come out and shipped to all of you beautiful people, and it makes me very nervous but also very excited to think about. It's a surreal feeling. Okay, then when I had like my 5 scenes that I felt could be a part of the same story, I decided to get a bit more serious about it and plan it out. This is what I meant when I said that my writing actually starts before I sit down with a blank page. Because yes, you know, I am a spreadsheet person. I think the planning phase is one of the most enjoyable parts of writing, or like any creative project. And I had read quite a lot of books about storytelling and script writing and so on. So if you want a recommendation, I would definitely read Into the Woods by John Yorke. He's so good. So I knew that I wanted to have like an idea of the structure, like the ups and downs, and which chapters should have like a major turning point and that kind of thing. I just decided to, you know, let's go for 24 chapters. Every other chapter will be Sam, the female narrator, and every other chapter will be the male narrator, Luke. I wanted to make both characters in the relationship into narrators because I really wanted to tell both of their perspectives. But now, honestly, in hindsight, I really wouldn't recommend having a 2-narrator story as your first novel. It can be a bit tricky to handle. But I'm glad I did it because I'm so pleased with the result. That being said, I don't want you to think that just because the story poured out so quickly, that the whole process was easy that way. I love drafting, like writing first drafts, but I'm not a big fan of editing. It just takes ages writing a book. Like, it really does, with all the rounds that you have to go through, with like first with yourself, and then with your early readers, and then with your agent, and then with your editor at the publishing house, and then with the copy editor to like polish the sentences one last time. And now, just the other week actually, I finally finished with this last step, the copy edits, which means that yes, the book is now almost exactly 2 years since I started with that blank page. It's finally done. But before writing, when I was still planning, doing the whole spreadsheet thing with all the different chapters, one thing that kind of just made it click for me was the structure of the counting down of days. So in my novel, all 24 chapters have a day count. The first chapter is called 180 Days Left. The second chapter is called, I don't know, 164 days left or something like that, and so on, all the way down to 0 days left. This gave me sort of the structure to hang my story on, because I wanted the story to be, you know, beautiful and sexy and romantic, obviously, but I also wanted it to be tense and dramatic. For the main characters, I wanted to like describe a couple where the connection is so intense and like obvious to everyone who reads this book, but at the same time where you're feeling like just because they have such a connection and, you know, really consuming conversations, does it really mean that these two people should be together? So to have this should they, shouldn't they kind of tension, it felt natural to write characters that pull in very different directions with like widely different personalities. So Sam is chaotic and quite reckless, while Luke is more like careful and controlled, and they're both quite lost and haven't really found themselves yet. So it's not girl meets boy, it's more chaos meets control. In my spreadsheet, I had 24 chapters, 2 12-chapter halves or 4 6-chapter parts of the story, and I had already put down in which chapters the major turning point should be, so it made it like so easy to come up with the scenes for each chapter. Seriously, it was really helpful, like knowing, okay, this is a crisis or this is a good spot. And then, because, well, I am a quite stubborn person, I just stuck to the plan. Yeah, like once I sat down and started writing, I didn't change my mind about the chapters one bit. I think it's because I was so eager to get this down on the page. I felt like I had wasted so much time writing a thriller that no one would ever publish. I was now like so behind, and it created this feeling of like urgency, like I better fucking write, you know? And knowing exactly where I was going, so that when I was writing, I don't know, chapter 5, I didn't have to worry about what would happen in chapter 6 or chapter 20. I knew the story had like a satisfying curve already. It made it so much easier to focus on the chapter I was actually writing and making that nice. But of course, I was working full-time as an influencer then, so I had a lot of time management issues to deal with. And I know that quarantine was horrible to a lot of creative people, like finding the calm and inspiration to be creative was difficult to a lot of writers. But for me, it was the opposite. I had no meetings and no events to go to, and writing this story and getting like completely immersed in this world that I was creating, it was the best possible way to get a break from, you know, all the anxiety and worries of the real world. So I just crammed my days together. I did my influencer stuff on Monday, Tuesday, and sometimes Wednesday, and then I had the rest of the days of the week to just write away. I would get up early, write very intensely between maybe 7 and 12, and then have lunch, then go for like a 90-minute walk where I would just like pop my earbuds in and listen to music and plan the scene that I will write that afternoon. Not actively plan it, more like, okay, I know that in the next scene, you know, Sam will talk to this person about this problem, and then I would just mull it over and let my brain kind of drift where I wanted to. So when I sat down at my desk again in the afternoon, I would have like a snippet of dialogue to start with, or like I would know the mood or the place, or like have a feeling that she would express somehow. Basically, when sitting down and started writing again, I already had an image of the scene, like an atmosphere to go from. By the end of those 7 weeks, I told David that I wanted a 5-day at-home writing retreat where he just had to like let me sit by myself in a room and not talk to him or do any dishes or anything like that. And since this was by the end of the novel, it kind of wrote itself. In those 5 days, I wrote 25,000 words. The whole book is about 80,000, which is normal book length, like 300 pages or so. But yeah, 8 weeks to write the first draft isn't normal, and I actually wouldn't recommend it at all because my brain was basically fried after that. It was sort of like, I was sort of in a frenzy. Of course, since then I've edited so many times, but super strangely, the chapters are all there. Like what happened in the 24 chapters in the first draft is what happens in the chapters in the final draft. And this has now become the book. This has really made me feel like the whole spreadsheet tactic of like planning all the scenes and chapters and turning points ahead will save so much time in editing later. But even more so, I'm in love with this idea of writing a bunch of scenes freely before sitting down seriously. Because if you write like 10 scenes and 5 of them are singing and have a pulse that you can use, then it's like, you know, you have something with real juice to start your novel on. So for the next book, this is what I have been doing lately, just writing scenes that I think could fit into the story idea that I have, and then picking the ones that sing to build my next structure on. Anyway, this is just how I did it, but every author I know or have like listened to interviews with, everyone has their own process of like their own way of dealing with a blank page. For me, it's just lovely to plan beforehand, but most creatives hate doing that. So I try not to listen too much to rules or tips and stuff like that and just go with what feels right, you know. Do you have like a creative routine, like a way that you come up with ideas for your next project or make it less scary or daunting? I think it's one of the most interesting things about human behavior, this like crazy urge to create beautiful things. And I just love hearing other people talk about how they do it. I actually have like a very precise daily writing routine, how I get into the mood. So if you want me to talk about that in a future video, I'd be super happy to. Just let me know if you'd be interested in that. And, you know, also in how I got my agent and how I found a publisher for OK Days. I'm more than happy to tell you about it. But I think that's it for today. Hope you're being happy in your own creative process right now. It's like, when you're in that mood of like being excited about your project, it's like nothing better, am I right? Anyway, can't wait to chat with you in the comments, but even more so, I can't wait for June so I can get to know what you guys think of Sam and Luke. I mean, if you feel like reading it, of course. Oh, I really hope you do, and I hope that you will tell me nice things about it. Okay, now it's time for me to go get writing on the next book, and I will see you next week already, I hope. Do you want to create a beautiful site, maybe start your own blog? If so, you should definitely do it with Squarespace. They have great blogging tools to share your stories, photos and videos to make it easy to reach your audience. You can also auto-post your content to Twitter, Tumblr or Facebook and simply schedule your posts for them to be properly tagged and the descriptions and titles will show up correctly. You can of course add your social media accounts to your site so that it's easy for your readers to find you anywhere. Squarespace also have great traffic analytics so that you can see how many people are visiting your site, how long they're staying for, where they're coming from and what they're interested in, like books or fashion or maybe interior design, for example. So what are you waiting for? Go get your free trial today at squarespace.com, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/JennyMustard to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Have a lovely week and see you next week already. Bye for now.